That's nice.
Arena applause.
Yes, I like that.
That's how we like to be let in. Thank you, Ryan, so much
now
for
we
that.
feel just like the U.S. women's national team. That must have been what it was like.
Yeah, right. Welcome, everyone. You have landed at Distill, a 360-degree view of life in sports. My name is Wendy Rosenthal. I am your co-host along with the wonderful, fantastic, always surprised she's still my friend, Ava Schwitzer. I cause her so much grief all the time. So,
and we're here, excited to be here,
yeah.
even if we are a little bit jet lagged.
And full because we had an amazing lunch. I won't give a plug until they sponsor us, but it was really good.
It was really good food.
We are here every other Thursday at 1 p.m. on the West Coast of the United States at the wonderful UBN Go studios. And I'd like to welcome Ryan, who is back as our engineer. Welcome.
It was good to see you guys again.
Yeah, we missed you. How you doing?
Too. I'm good. I'm well.
Enjoying the summer?
We've had a little shaky summer so far. But,
we have.
We were out of town for both of them. We were very excited to miss those.
I had both of them, and the first one was my first earthquake.
Oh, is that
followed
right?
by the next day, which was the second earthquake.
And you haven't left yet. You're still here.
I'm still in the studio.
What a trooper.
We were actually live on camera when the second one hit.
Is that right?
We got a good clip of it. It's kind of funny.
Oh, did you put it up on YouTube? There are a few viral videos of that. That's great.
Yeah,
I'll have to go look at it.
Yeah.
We are here every other week talking about our passion, it kind of consumes our lives, the world of sports. And as many of you know, we talk about more stories around sports and how sports is a metaphor for life. So we're not always talking about what's going on in the field or the scores from last night's game, but we are passionate about it nonetheless.
Yeah.
Ava and I are the very proud co-owners of a company called the Distillery Inc., where we have the privilege of working with athletes at all levels to help them repurpose their innate athletic skills to a life beyond their sports, a fulfilling life beyond their sports. And that's why we sit here every other week to talk about it, because, we think we can. Today, we are very fortunate to be joined by a lovely gentleman by the name of Steve King, who is the proprietor, founder, of a company that we have talked about in the past. We've had a couple of people on to talk about some of the things they do at All For Health and Wellness. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
It's always a tongue twister for me. I always want to say it the other way, so I had to think about it. But
That's why I wore this shirt.
Yeah. We're going to get started talking to Steve in a minute about some of the very really insightful trials and tribulations that he encountered along his way, being the parent of an elite athlete, being an athlete himself, and some of the pitfalls and kind of, I don't want to keep saying challenges. There's a lot of amazing things about it, but, it's not so easy. So we were very fortunate to have him here to talk his story. But before we talk with Steve, and we want you to join in our conversation, we want to let you know that we are happy to have you call in or with your comments, or write your comments in our Facebook page. We do always look, and we like your questions. Our call-in phone number is 524-2599. Usually I'm really good at remembering it. It's
323-524-2599.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Or Facebook Live.
Exactly. Send us your comments. Call with any questions. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
And as always, we like to start off the show with, some thoughts and comments on the world of sports over the last couple of weeks since we were here with you last. And I don't think there's much more to talk about except for this. I went to a tractor pull. No, sorry. I did actually go to a tractor pull. And I do want to talk about that because that was fascinating. But let's talk about the more exciting thing. Kawhi Leonard coming to
Well, that's fun too. That's fun too. Serena Williams, we're rooting for her as well. We want her another Grand Slam post baby. We want it for her. We're rooting for her.
But really,
but how can we not talk about the U.S. women's national team?
How
and
can
that
we not?
Huge win. We were actually in New York for the ticker tape parade yesterday.
We
were in New York around it as it was happening.
we got blocked in traffic,
and we were busy working. But they were there.
They were there.
And we heard amazing things about it.
We saw it on the news, and like I said, we got stuck in traffic because
of
it. But there you go.
But what a phenomenal Women's World Cup.
It was amazing.
I thought it was great soccer all around from start to finish, all the teams. I thought it was just beautiful. And those last 3-4 games, we were seeing just some wild stuff.
Well, and I think we were seeing incredibly high class soccer being played. I mean, it wasn't like you're not missing anything by watching women's soccer.
Yeah.
I mean, honest to goodness.
Right.
I don't think, because we were watching all along the way, we were watching the Copa America.
Right.
And CONCACAF.
Africa Cup of Nations.
Yes.
I mean, there was so much
So
soccer
we were watching
happening.
lots of soccer.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you.
And the reffing in the Women's World Cup, I got to say, was pretty good too, especially when we're comparing it
They
to
were
like
women,
the
right?
Copa America women.
Yeah.
But I mean, really great
But
reffing.
I just want to say that the refs
They were
women.
The refs
so
were women.
there's
And
something
really
to that,
great
right?
reffing. Yes, exactly. And we didn't see
We're not biased.
We didn't
We're
see
really
nearly
not.
as much VAR use as we did during the men's tournaments. But we won't get started on we won't get started on VAR either.
That's going to be
because it's just
another
about
show.
saluting the women.
We don't. Yes. No, but it was. I think it was the bottom line. It was great sport.
Yeah.
Forget all of the, all of the not controversies, but all the discussions and all of the conversation. I don't think, and I think the women around the world who played, as you're saying, proved why women's soccer is equal in enjoyment and quality.
Sure.
And at a high caliber to the men's soccer.
Yeah.
That's just how I feel. And
I agree.
And we were talking what was interesting to me about the Women's World Cup is that, at least in, kind of my circle of friends who aren't normally soccer fans, really, they don't watch a lot of it.
Right.
They were swept up and started
absolutely.
to becoming very I want to watch more.
Yeah.
So I think.
And that's what we see every Women's World Cup. I mean, even with the Men's World Cup, there are fans, obviously, of the U.S. men's team, but there isn't this general sort of sweeping the nation, getting people excited about this team.
Right.
With the Men's Cup as it is with the Women's Cup.
Right.
It's such completely
By
different.
the way, I tip my hat to the men.
They did great.
They did great.
We're very happy to see that.
We were very happy to see it, and they really took Mexico. I thought they were gonna do it because they had 8 shots on goal that were spectacular that didn't go in for whatever reason. But
well, I think what's interesting is that the women had a chance to go back to back,
right,
and that just doesn't happen,
right.
And so they had an enormous amount of pressure on them,
sure,
much more than you see on the men's side.
Yeah.
So I think that coupled with the excitement and everything really provided the stage for them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. No, it was amazing.
And you got to watch the ESPYs, so you
Yes.
actually heard a
We were
bit
on
of
a
what
plane.
the women's players had to say. What was the big takeaway for you?
Well, I thought it was interesting because Alex Morgan was accepting the honor, and the award is the best team.
Yeah.
And I thought that her comments were very interesting. She talked about having women's stage being equal to the men's stage.
Sure.
I wish she would have said something about equal pay because I'm a big believer in that. I think that they have earned that. But I thought that the response that she got from the audience was awesome and well deserved.
So
right?
yeah.
I think they put on a show.
Yeah.
And they should get rewarded accordingly, both by trophies and by money.
Right, exactly.
Well, and from my perspective, they are walking the walk. They're not just complaining about it.
Correct.
They're delivering. And when you deliver, you cannot deny You cannot deny it.
You can't deny success.
It's not like they're just out there complaining, saying, "Oh, poor me."
Yeah.
It's like, no, we're elevating the sport of soccer,
right?
In general, FIFA, like we're helping around the world to elevate the sport of soccer, and you need to acknowledge us.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
So let's hope that happens. And let me tell you, a tractor pull. It's an unheralded sport, and one that provides much enjoyment and beer for people who know how to pull tractors.
Right.
I just have to say one word more on it. They had the turbine class tractors.
This was over a family wedding
in Iowa.
In Iowa, exactly.
I didn't think it was local.
Yeah, this is not something that we're doing here.
Well, it might be. You never know. We have a lot of farmland up north.
That's true.
Maybe Ryan can pull up a turbine tractor pull, which literally was 2 big wheels, a cab for the driver, a place to put the engine, and 2 turbine engine exhaust pipes that went. Yes,
it sounds
sort of like that.
That sounds loud.
It was like being on the runway at LAX,
right,
next to a plane when it took off.
Yeah.
And I said to my family who was standing there with me, I don't think they use those in the fields to harvest corn.
You don't think so?
No. It was so anybody who's listening out there, if you are a tractor puller, please let us know. We'd love to talk to you because I actually said it was fun.
Right.
It was really
We
fun.
could do a whole show around tractor pulling and,
I think we should.
you know,
I think we should because it was.
the athletes who love it.
So how many women were doing that?
You know what? I couldn't tell you because from where we were sitting, you know, the drivers are in the cages.
yeah.
Ryan's pulling up a picture, and they have the helmets. I mean, they're very well kitted out. And by the way, heavily sponsored. I mean, there were a ton of national brand advertisers.
Sure.
And this was like, it wasn't a big arena. I mean, maybe there's 1,000 people there, but
It's amazing.
I learned something new,
Yeah.
and that's what I love
You know
about
what?
traveling.
That's what we want.
I learned something new.
That's what we want.
And in that vein of learning something new,
Yes.
and in the vein of being a parent ourselves,
Exactly.
we really had a lovely conversation with Steve when we were down at All for Health and Wellness, getting the luxury tour that we really enjoyed and advocate everybody should go.
Luxury
if you're
tour
living,
and treatment. It was
and treatment. It
phenomenal.
was awesome,
Yeah.
and workout that thanks to the cryotherapy, I wasn't sore the next day, so it was even better. One of the things that came up in our conversation was the fact that Steve's son, Taylor, has been and continues to be an athlete, although in a different way today. An elite athlete in basketball who played for Duke University and then Villanova, and went on to play in the European Professional League. And I'm going to let him tell the story. But one of the things that caught our attention was the challenges that Steve talked about in terms of himself and his relationship with his son being the parent of an elite athlete and trying to usher somebody who clearly has the potential
Yeah.
to become a superstar or a star in a professional sports league like the NBA. And we thought it was really important to hear your story, to ask you questions, because, as Ava and I both have kids that are, love sports,
Yeah.
play sports, and have potential in sports. There's a lot of pitfalls, and we want to try and avoid them. So we're going to learn from your mistakes.
Well, good luck with that.
And your lessons and the amazing things that you did well. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
you for
And
having
can you just give us a couple of minutes, a little bit about you and your background and what
Okay.
brought you here?
Well, I was raised right down the street here. My father built the smokehouse, which is right next door. And I was, I grew up playing sports. That's what I did, and I loved all sports. But I grew up with a family where, back when I grew up, it was the dad worked and the mom stayed at home. And so the relationship I had with my dad, I would call distant, for lack of a better word. And what happened was that I continued on to play sports, and I played high school sports, and then I played some college sports, and basketball in particular. And I don't believe, from what I can remember, my dad ever saw me play a game. And at the time, I didn't give a lot of thought to that.
Sure.
It wasn't something that was that made me angry or any of that. I was hanging out with my friends and everything, and then along came my kids, and years later, and so it started. I had 3 daughters and then a son.
Who are also
All of them.
fabulous athletes. I didn't mean to not include your daughters.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we better, because I believe they're listening. So,
Yeah. So sorry. Did not mean just to focus on your brother.
So, but it's interesting because my daughters grew up in an era where Title IX was just coming into effect, and trust me, while we really appreciate the women's soccer accomplishments, without Title IX, none of that would have happened.
For those of you who might not know, because many of our fans watch us from overseas, Title IX is an equalization of scholarships at the collegiate level. For if a scholarship is given in a male sport, then they have to give a similar scholarship to women in the
Correct.
women's sports.
Correct. And in the case of my daughter, my second daughter, who was a softball pitcher, before she started to play, they didn't have scholarships for softball. And then when they started to enhance the sport and it became apparent that it was going to be a collegiate sport, they had to offer equal scholarships for softball that they did in baseball.
Right.
So my daughter went to the University of Texas on a scholarship and was a collegiate softball pitcher there.
Put your hand down.
And I thought you were talking to
She's
me.
a Trojan.
I'm a Trojan,
allowed to
but
do that.
I
I
have
don't-
deep,
I don't
deep connections to the
care.
University of Texas.
She
Sorry.
loved the University of Texas, and she was there, and she got hurt. She had a shoulder injury, and then she transferred to the University of Pacific and finished her career there and graduated with a sports management degree. But all my daughters played sports, and my oldest daughter was a college basketball player at Sonoma State, and my third daughter was a swimmer and a water polo player, and all different sports. Traveled all over the country, watching all of them play their different sports.
Sure.
And then, but I began to be that parent who was, I don't want to call them overbearing, but
You were
But-
involved.
yeah,
Deeply,
I'll give you an example.
deeply involved.
My second daughter, the pitcher, Natalie is her name. She started taking pitching lessons when she was 9. And so, we had this thing that if she didn't practice pitching, I wouldn't pay for her lesson.
Yeah.
That was kind of thing. And but it got more intense and more intense, and the stakes became higher and
Sure.
higher because she was a high level athlete. She was one of the top pitchers in the United States when she was in high school. And so what happened is that my living her dream became more about me than it did about her.
I just want to interrupt only because I think many people can relate to what you're saying, even if they aren't or weren't an elite athlete. I mean, I look at my dad loves playing golf, still loves playing golf, and when I was a kid, he wanted me to play golf, and so he took me out there and got me lessons, and he would stand behind the coach who was teaching me, and he would be telling him what he was doing wrong, and he was telling me, and I love my dad. I just didn't have the drive to push through.
Right.
But I think people can relate to what you're talking about, even at any level of sports, because if you have a parent that is, involved in that level, it can be very distracting.
Yeah, and it's not relegated to sports.
Sure.
True.
It happens in music, it happens in the arts, it happens
Yeah.
in everywhere,
Absolutely.
right? Where the parent has excelled or has, and in my case, I played a lot of sports and I played some collegiate basketball, but I wasn't a superstar. So, I had visions of my kids all being superstars,
Yeah.
right? And so it became more about me than it was about them.
Yeah.
And I think it's very subtle. I don't think it's something that you go out there planning. I think it just kind of evolves. So I can tell you a couple funny instances with my daughter. When she was pitching, I would first of all, I was her coach for many years.
Oh, that's like the
if you-
double. That's the double whammy.
It
If you
really
talk to her,
is.
if you talk to her, she'll tell you some stories that I probably can't tell on the air here. But she,
We're not
That's
overlooked
true.
by
That's
the.
right.
We're on online. You can say what you want.
but she, I would sit when she finally was playing for another coach. I would sit behind the backstop, right, and I would scream at her and say, "Just throw strikes, just throw
do it."
strikes," and she would give me this glare from the mound, right?
Sure.
And finally, when she was at Texas, she said, "You can no longer sit behind
Yeah.
the backstop. You have to go sit down."
She's
on
like,
the-
"Thank
on the
God,
left field,
I'm
on
old
the-
enough to go to
Right.
college."
on the left field line, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I did.
Yeah.
So it was, she was driven to be good. So I think she eventually kind of tuned me out.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened. But then fast forward to Taylor. So when Taylor came along, he started playing basketball when he was 2. I took a basketball out, and he was right-handed, and I made him use the left hand because I'm left-handed.
Yeah.
And he was always the biggest kid. He's 6'8", so he was always the biggest kid. And he started playing club when he was 9, and we traveled all around the country. And I was a nutcase.
Yeah.
I mean, to be truthful with you, and I laugh about it today. It wasn't really
It
funny
wasn't
at
funny
the time.
then. Sure.
No, but what does a nutcase mean?
Okay, it would be somebody that would be in the stands. Okay, I'll give you an example. LeVar Bell.
Oh, yeah.
Does that
Really?
does that not to that quite that degree?
Okay, again, for those who don't know LeVar Bell, Ball, sorry, not Bell, Ball.
Ball.
You said Bell, so
I
I
think I
copied
did.
you. What does that mean? No, just
It
like
means
pushes.
controlling
It's
and
controlling.
Yeah.
It's
You have a roadmap for exactly what that child's
that's right,
career path is going to be.
and they have no choice.
Right.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
They have no choice.
Yeah.
This is what they're going to do.
Yeah.
This is the way they are.
Sure.
They didn't have sleepovers. They didn't go to the snow and go skiing. They didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
What they did was they played their sport.
Yeah.
So did your son and or daughters ever come to you and say, Daddy, I don't want to play?
No.
So interesting. Even though you were like controlling it and making it something that they had to do, they obviously had an internal passion for it.
They loved the sport and they were good at it. So I think that helped a lot, and they were getting a lot of notoriety.
Sure.
They were playing at a very high level, and that's how Taylor played all the way from that 9-year-old all the way up. By the time he was in 8th grade, he was being recruited by universities.
Yeah.
And
Okay, I want to stop right there. I think we should
Yeah.
interject, because I don't think a lot of parents understand, because we all believe our kids are awesome
Yeah.
and talented
Yep.
and, are better than other kids. Let's be honest. We think even when they're not, they are.
Yep.
So I didn't even know that somebody would recruit you from college at an 8th
Oh,
grade
even
level.
younger than that now. They're being approached.
Right.
It's phenomenal.
When Taylor was in 8th grade,
But how did they tell in 8th grade?
Because they worked through other people in the club world.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we took an unofficial visit to UCLA, because you couldn't take official visits till you were a junior in high school. We went to UCLA. Ben Howland was the head coach at UCLA. And indirectly, without they can't offer you a scholarship because they can't legally do that. But they said that they wanted Taylor to go there. He wanted Taylor to be his first recruit.
Yeah.
So it would get out in the airwaves and social media and everywhere else. And so we committed to UCLA when Taylor was in 8th grade.
How do you when you commit, what do you
We tell them that we're going to UCLA.
Right.
just
Verbal
verbally?
commitment.
Verbal commitment.
Yeah.
So we continued on, and we watched UCLA play over the next couple years. And Taylor had a couple friends who played club ball with him who played at UCLA. And it became apparent that he didn't really like the style of play at UCLA. So we told Coach Holland that we were going to look for other places. And so Taylor basically opened it up, as they say,
Yeah.
and started to get recruited by many universities.
And there's nothing
mostly.
that UCLA could have done to you for doing that, because
Oh,
it was
no.
just a verbal.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
nothing.
But did
And-
they help? Let me ask this again. I want to help enlighten parents that
Sure.
might be in this situation. Did they did they support Taylor along the way, like bringing him in and letting him work out with the team? Did they, or it was just like, okay, you've made the commitment, now we'll talk to you in 3 years?
They would talk to us through other people. So in other words, they would talk to the club coach coach would talk to us, and we would do the walk by at club tournaments and say, hi coach, how are you, and all that kind of stuff. And on weekends, they had an open gym at UCLA, and he could go up and play at UCLA. And he used to go up, when he was going into 9th grade, go up and play with some of the guys up there, because he was big and
Sure.
he could compete with some of those guys. So so that continued on, and he went to probably one of the highest level basketball programs in Southern California at Mater Dei, and he started as a freshman, and he played he did not start his first game, and then he started the next 137 straight games, and he broke all the scoring records in Orange County.
Yeah.
Was the number 1 scorer in the state. I mean, a lot of different records that he held. And all, so everybody was coming after him. The Dukes, the North Carolinas, the Villanovas, the Notre Dames, and all of those.
And at this point, do you start seeing the shoe companies, the athletic gear? Did the sponsors start coming out of the woodwork at this point?
Everywhere. And again, they work through
Yeah.
the club team.
Sure.
So it would be not unusual for me to come home from work and have 7 boxes in the front porch of shoes. I mean, he had so many shoes, I couldn't even tell you how many shoes that he had. And so you get caught up in that whole thing, right? Yeah. And as a parent, and I have these delusions that he's going to be one of the top 3 picks in the NBA.
Sure.
We were invited to the NBA camps, and he became a McDonald's All-American, and the reality, the truth of the matter is most McDonald's All-Americans end up being drafted or end up playing in the NBA at one time or another, most of them.
Yeah.
And he was, teammates with Kevin Love and, Taj Gibson and, a lot of these guys. So,
Steve, I'm sorry. Would you mind pulling that mic a little closer to you?
sure. So what would happen is, and it got worse. Our relationship got worse.
Yeah.
When he was, I'll tell you this story because he'll probably tell you this story at some point.
And then can you tell us where Mom was throughout this
Yes.
whole process and how she felt?
She was not happy. In fact, the real truth of the matter is it was one of the things that eventually came between us down the road. And, we would go to games and I'd sit by myself.
Yeah.
And all the sisters and the mom would sit together and I'd sit by myself. And I was just focused on him. And,
You were in your zone.
well, let me tell you what happens then. And so he looks at me
Yeah.
as he runs up and down the court.
Sure.
And the coaches would come to me and say, he's got to stop looking at you. So, but the more I yelled, the more he would look at me.
Right. Waiting for approval, you think? Or
100% waiting for approval. It was all about approval. And because he wanted to please me.
Sure.
Right? And I wanted him to please me.
Yeah.
Right? And, it was the kind of story I tell when he had a great game, our house was a wonderful place to be. When he had a bad game, it was not a good place to be.
And that was because of you or him?
Me.
Yeah.
Because it's how you, as a parent, you react, right? It no longer became, and go enjoy the game. It was about how well you did in the game.
Sure.
Now,
And that's a sad thing.
when it's about how well you did in the game, is it because you were just living vicariously through him because you wish you had been able to do what he was doing? Is it because you're looking at it and saying, I'm going to have a superstar for a son, so I'm going to get notoriety or I'm going to get money? Or like what angle were you coming at that it was that important?
In my particular case, it wasn't about the money. I could afford to pay for my kids' lessons and all that kind of stuff, but it was really about the notoriety.
And I think
for
for
me,
him?
For
Okay.
me.
Yeah.
Because living vicariously through your child, you become them. And it becomes, again, as I said before, it becomes all about you and not about their happiness. And so it just, and again, as I said, you get caught up in it, right? You end up just becoming part of it.
Yeah.
And they, the outside world, the club world, and all of that keeps feeding it.
Oh, absolutely.
They keep feeding it, like your kid's going to be great, your kid's going to be this and that. So again, fast forward.
Wait. Can I
I'm
ask
sorry.
you before
Yes,
you go
sure.
on? So, coming again back to that situation where you're sitting in the stands and you're yelling, and the coaches are saying you can't keep looking at you. Was there any other reprimanding that you were getting from either other parents going, "Stop yelling at your kid," or a coach, or the organization saying, "Back up"? Because nowadays, this was not yesterday. This was 10 years ago or so. Nowadays, there's all these rules when your kid's playing in sports, parents are there, to cheer, not to criticize, and they, tell you all this. Was that atmosphere there or no?
It was there to a certain degree, but again, you're playing at a high level, and they want your kid there.
Right.
So they're willing to put up with a lot.
Got it.
Yeah.
Because
So
you're,
interesting.
Because
He's
your
doing
kid's
well.
good.
Yeah, he's
Right?
doing well. Exactly.
And it's not like youth sports where they can just say, you go home.
Right.
They're not going to tell Taylor to go home.
Right.
and
Because he's playing at that level.
Yes, because he's playing at that level. So he finished high school and he went on recruiting trips and so forth, and he ended up going to Duke. So he goes to Duke, and of course, what's the first thing I do is I get an apartment in Durham.
He's like, he's going, finally.
He did.
I am away from my family.
You don't need a dorm.
He did.
We got us an apartment.
He's like, I got an apartment. What else would you do, right? So I get this apartment.
And how did he feel? Did he say how he felt about that?
Never.
Never.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so he goes to Duke, and I have the apartment, and he isn't playing as much as he thought he should play.
Sure.
And he's definitely not playing as much as I thought he should play. And so he already is, and he had suffered from ADHD, and unfortunately, nobody knew it.
Yeah.
So he goes to Duke, and he's trying to compete in the classroom at a school that's got everybody there is at 4.3 or above,
Right.
and he's struggling, and they're trying to help him. And so the first call I got was from Coach K, and he says, "We got a problem." I said, "What's that?"
Coach K, let me just,
Oh,
again,
yes.
for those who might know, Coach K is the most decorated, honored.
He's a legend.
He's a legend
Yeah.
in college basketball at Duke, particularly, but in all of NC2A basketball. I don't know how many championships he's won.
And he's a great man, but he calls me. He says, "We have a problem."
Yeah.
And because as soon as the phone rang, I knew it was trouble. And
The coach is calling.
Yeah, and
he has you on speed
he
dial.
didn't pass his drug test. It was marijuana. It wasn't in the
Which is
spectrum
legal
of,
now.
Which is when the spectrum of life wasn't the end of the world, but it was the beginning of this downhill slide, and it was like I was crushed. Right, I was crushed because I'm going to go back a little bit. When I was playing sports, I was playing college basketball, and I had a choice. I could have gone left and continued to play college basketball, or I could have gone right and got into illegal drugs and that kind of lifestyle, alcohol, drugs, and I chose to go right.
Yeah.
And I saw him, and I said, "Oh my God, he's going to do exactly the same thing I did."
Yeah.
And I can say that I've been sober for 38 years now, and so none of my kids have ever seen me drink or do drugs. And I saw this kid going down the same path, and I was like, "What do I do now?" Right? But it continued, right? And so he decided he would leave Duke University.
Did they ask him to leave?
They didn't ask him to leave. They didn't say you can't come back. But it became apparent that, and he felt that he should be playing more, and so he wanted to go to a different school.
Yeah.
So he transfers to Villanova. So he has to sit out 1 year at Villanova because he transferred. And Villanova, and here's the great part about him. His attitude while this was all going on was at the highest level. So all the schools that had originally recruited him all came back. So it wasn't like he had a bad attitude or any of that.
Yeah.
I mean, he was very positive. He was probably one of the best teammates he could ever have, and all the guys that have played with him will tell you that.
Sure.
So he goes to Villanova, and he has to sit out that year, and that's danger 101.
Right.
When you have to sit out this year because he's again going to a prestigious university who has a high level of academic excellence, and he's struggling.
Right.
And so he's getting back into that same thing, and now it's graduating a little bit.
Right.
Now,
So
go ahead.
what I was going to ask, do you feel like the start of it was to maybe release pressure or to calm whatever was, like, as a reaction to how you were engaging with him, the pressure he was feeling?
I think it was all the pressure
All the pressure.
from me, from the
Academically.
academically, the peers, not measuring up to where he thought he should be, anxiety. I think it's a combination of all that with no outlet. See, that's the key problem, I think, that we can talk about, is that where do these kids go when they have these issues, right? Where are the people that have experienced it? It's like when you have an alcohol and drug problem, you go talk to people who have had alcohol and drug problems,
Sure.
right? Because
Right.
they understand. People who have cancer talk to people who have cancer. Same kind of situation in as it relates to sports.
Yeah.
If there are people out there that could help you along the way there, instead of saying he's just a bad guy,
Yeah.
right? So he gets this label, he's a bad guy, and he's not. He's a kid that's lost. So he goes through the same situation. He's playing at Villanova, playing very well, but academically he's struggling big time. And so the reality is he had to come home and at that time, my ex-wife and I were going through a divorce, and so he, wanted to come home. So he goes to Concordia University where he could play right away. He was going to go to USC, but SC was going through a lot of issues at that particular time with O.J. Mayo and that whole scene back then.
Right.
Because Taylor used to play with O.J. and So anyway, so he goes to Concordia, and he's a superstar at Concordia. They went to the NAIA championship. He was player of the year and the whole stuff. But then he decides, again, the struggle with the classroom, the struggle with this, identity and all that. So he decides he's going to go play overseas.
Yeah.
And
Do you think if he had stayed, he might have had a chance at being drafted into the NBA?
I think he would have had a chance to play in the NBA.
Okay.
Now, whether he'd been drafted or not, I'm not sure, because I've seen him compete with all those guys.
Yeah.
And truthfully, even to this day, he plays at the same level as these guys. I think that he could, without a question, compete. He's got some skill level as a shooter, and that every NBA team wants.
Yeah.
So, and he's been encouraged. I mean, he's been encouraged by other guys in the NBA that he said, why don't stop,
Sure.
But he enjoyed playing overseas.
Right.
I think it was a place for him to express himself and be able to play without Dad being there, And one day, I can't even begin to tell you what day it was, how the whole thing happened.
Yeah.
I decided I needed to clear the air with my kids. So I talked to all of them, and I talked to them and made an apology for my behavior, right? Because it became really apparent where the issue was. And so I went to...
Because you were seeing it from all of your kids, not just him.
Oh, yeah, all of them.
Yeah.
So I went to them and apologized. And, the thing that was probably the stuff that will stick to me forever and ever is they said they just wanted a dad to love them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And isn't that what they all want?
Right.
Right? And so that was the beginning of the healing process for Taylor and me, and also for my daughters as well.
Sure.
And sometimes this is hard to talk about, by the way.
Absolutely. I can understand.
But we appreciate it. It's so important.
So we started on this path, and I would go to games and overseas. I'd go to London to see him play, and I'd go to, all over the world to watch him play. And by that time I had remarried, and my wife Amy and I would go to London and watch him play. And it was a whole different world, right? I could sit there and watch him play and not critique.
Sure.
And not, I had to sit on my hands sometimes, right? But it was not about me anymore. It was about him having fun.
And did you find that you could enjoy the game more or less because you
so
weren't,
much more,
right? Yeah.
So much more.
Yeah.
And get so much more excitement for him.
Sure.
It used to be the saying that you would say, "I'm proud of you."
Yeah.
Well, when you say to your child, you're proud of them, it becomes about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Instead of saying, "I'm excited for you."
Yeah.
Or that kind of thing, where then it becomes them, not you.
Yeah, I try and avoid saying I'm proud.
Absolutely.
Like I try and say to my son, I'm really excited. Wow, you learned a great skill. That's exciting for it's going to help you. Like I try and avoid it because I've heard that before. Actually.
Make it their success,
exactly
not yours.
Yeah.
And I think that's what parents suffer from.
Sure.
So we've been on this journey ever since, and it's been wonderful.
I have a few more questions because I think you can really enlighten all of us.
Yeah.
I always have lots of questions. Sorry, I don't mean to always interrupt, but I mean, there's a few things that you said. How did you open your eyes to what you were doing? Because what I'm hearing you talk about is a lot of self-revelation in terms of recognizing what you were doing, and that's never easy for anybody to do on any level, but certainly parents.
Well,
being one myself,
I think in my soul, I always knew that I was like that, and it, people pointed out that I was like that, and
you
it
could have
wasn't-
rejected it
and
because your kids
true.
weren't saying anything.
True. I wasn't a bad parent. I just lived through them. So there was a difference, right? I mean, I didn't beat my kids and I didn't do any of that kind of stuff. But I had to be, I needed to be the center of attention with them, right? I needed to have that equal attention. And I think the self-revelation came was when I finally realized it wasn't about me. It wasn't about how I needed to be, right? It wasn't about my recognition. And when that happened, that's when the light bulb went off.
That's
the light bulb
amazing.
went off and said, as I told you guys before that, one of my dreams someday was to write a book on how not to raise an elite athlete.
Exactly.
Right? Because
I still think you should write it.
because I think there is so much room for us to be of service to parents out there who have gone through stuff like that. And because we all know that only 1% of the athletes out there at the elite level make any money.
Right.
The rest of them have to figure out what they're going to do with the rest of their life.
Sure.
So when Taylor's case, when he finished playing, he met a wonderful woman in the UK, and they got married, and they have a little boy. And he decided that, you know what, I need to think about life after basketball.
Sure.
And he came back here, and he is absolutely wonderful with kids. And so he started a training center for kids. And as a matter of fact, he works at our facility, and he does strength and conditioning with kids. And he's found a niche, right? And it's now all about him, all about what he does. But he has learned so much, and maybe because of the situation that happened with me, that he's able to give back to the kids.
Right.
And as we talked about it, at lunch, that this whole idea of playing sports ultimately comes down to giving back while you're playing and afterwards.
Sure.
Right? It's all about giving back. So he's given back now, and it's quite a journey with him. But
So a lot of the other things that you talked about in your journey with your kids, I think also can be very helpful to parents. For example, you talked about having enough money to do anything that you needed to do for him, but the fact is that you still fell prey to the vision of stardom and all the boxes of shoes that were arriving on your doorstep. And so what that says to me is that it doesn't really matter what your socioeconomic situation is, that you as a parent have the ability to go down a more challenging road with your kid if they're an elite athlete, just because of all of the shiny lights, shiny pennies, and things that they'll put along the trail. So now looking back, was there any point during that process where you could give advice to somebody to say, hey, like, not just don't live vicariously, like some real practical insight? Because not many people know what it's like to be courted by a Nike or an Adidas or a major university when your kid is only 13 years old.
Well, I think it all starts with keeping perspective, right? And the perspective is when they're 13 years old, they're 13 years old. They're not 17.
Yeah.
And I think that allowing them to live their life to a certain degree. See, one of the problems we have in today's world is that kids are shoehorned. They say you're a basketball player and you have to play basketball every day and work out every day if you ever want to be able to succeed.
Sure.
So the idea of going to the mountains one weekend and going snowboarding is out of the question.
Yeah.
Out of the question. So, I know that like my daughter who in Northern California who has a little boy and a little girl, they make it a point that they go to the river and water ski and they do snowboarding and everything because they want their kids to be able to experience all this, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's all about keeping everything in perspective.
And how does she feel about her children playing sports? Does she encourage that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We come.
Yeah.
They all of my kids have married athletes or former athletes.
Right.
And so it's kind of in the DNA, so to speak.
But play for fun, or is there that push for the club, playing? And
well, they're too young, I think.
Yeah.
My oldest grandchild's 8, so he's not there yet. But I think they have a perspective, and I think they understand that you need to expose them to all kinds of life experiences.
Sure.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that keeps us from staying on that straight path is that when you don't get to experience life as a whole and you're pigeonholed, where do you go when that pigeonhole closes up.
Exactly.
Right?
But what if you're a parent and you don't have the means that maybe you had to give your kid certain life experiences? Because we know many of elite athletes come from, not middle class America.
Right.
And, and by the way, even if you are middle class America, like I could see it. I could see why you did it. Not because you were trying to deprive your child of anything, but because he's going or she's going, I love softball. I want to go to pitching camp. I don't want to go hiking. Like, how do you feel? And maybe you don't have the answer, and I'm really asking for myself very selfishly. Like, how do you make sure that you are providing your kid, that you're pulling them away from something that they love and saying, now let's go sit on the beach, or let's go camping, or let's, where's that balance?
And I don't know if I have an answer to that, because I didn't do it.
Sure.
So
Fair enough.
because I didn't do it, I don't know if I can honestly answer that question. I think it's something that we all have to be aware of. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're aware of it, you'll tend to make decisions that are maybe a little bit different. I found myself not even being aware of it.
Sure.
Right? I was so caught up that that was the life, right?
Right.
And the truth of the matter, during Taylor's time when he was at his peak, everybody in the family suffered, right? Mm-hmm. All the girls suffered, right? Because they didn't get the attention. What happened for them is they were just along for the ride, so to speak. So everybody pays a price.
Yeah.
Your friends pay a price. It's just not a pleasant scene. And so I think the best way to be able to pass this on somehow is to be able to make yourself available to parents and make yourself available to groups and tell them your story.
Sure.
Right.
Because the only way, I can't tell them what to do because I didn't do it. I can tell them my experience of not doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
And what the outcome was.
And what the outcome is.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing. I don't care where you come from. I don't care what economic standard you have. Everybody needs to hear that story.
Yeah.
Because it has no barriers. It has no financial barrier or anything like that. Just
Yeah. If you are gonna live vicariously through your children, it will have a result.
Yeah, sure.
And that result is usually not as
a positive one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one where there's a lot of tension, and it creates a lot of, challenges within the family. Sure. And like you said, I mean, not to highlight it, but you cost your marriage. It could have cost you a relationship with your children. Yeah. Certainly, probably some friends. Yep. But what's so amazing about your story to me is that you worked through it and you were honest with yourself. And whatever point it is that somebody becomes honest with themselves, doesn't matter if it's 20 years later doing that. I'm not saying it was for you, but I'm saying that even if it's later, much later.
It's a good thing.
Yeah. It's a good thing, because that way you can, that's how we all grow.
I mean, we didn't talk to each other for, I don't know, a couple years.
Yeah.
Maybe a year and a half, 2 years or something, that I didn't want anything to do with him. And, I thought he's going down the wrong path, and I didn't want anything to do with him. And he didn't want anything to do with me.
Sure.
And, what a horrible existence,
Yeah.
right? And it's, for whatever reason, and I don't care what kind of a situation you're in as a parent, the last thing you want is to be in a place where you are separated from your kids.
Exactly.
Yep.
I mean,
Period.
it's the last thing you want.
Sure, absolutely.
So we've come through it, and it's funny because I watch him with these kids now. And he comes to me, he says, God, you should hear these dads.
Yeah.
Because he's an assistant varsity coach at a high school in Orange County, right?
Right.
So he comes to me, I think, and he goes, you should hear this, Dad. I thought it was you and this dad.
My gosh. I love it. I think that is the best, funniest place to end this. And can you believe it?
We're already done?
Yeah.
We have a minute to go. And listen, Steve, we want to thank you so much for being here, because, we really do like to look at the stories behind the scenes in sports. And I think this is one of the more important stories, and I don't think we've even delved in enough to it in highlighting for parents what that road is when you have an elite athlete, or any athlete. Let's just be honest, any athlete, kid in your world, that there is a path of sports that can be very positive, but can also be very negative.
Exactly.
And so I think that it's important for us to highlight this story. So thank you for being so open and sharing and coming on and talking about it.
And Ryan, could you put up, you have the website up there, amazing. So for folks who want to find Steve and be in touch with him, ask questions. I think people are going to have questions for you. And we didn't get a chance to go into All for Health and Wellness.
I know.
I know.
But they can find
You
you
have
on
to come and
website,
see us.
and they have to come and see you. Absolutely.
We're big advocates
Yeah.
for Steve and his team and what they can do to get you into a healthy, all around mental, mind, body, soul place.
Yeah.
So please check it out.
Also, TaylorKingBasketball.com.
And TaylorKingBasketball.com if you have a kid that
who has promised to come on our show. So
yes.
please look forward to that.
Yes. Again, thank you everyone who joined us today. We always appreciate you listening live or listening whenever you download our podcast, which you can find on all your favorite podcast platforms, including iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Play, CastBox, Stitcher, you name it, we're on it. So please check us out, subscribe, and download our shows anytime or on Facebook. You can find us at thedistilleryinc.com and the Distillery Inc. And we look forward, as always, to seeing you in a couple of weeks and talking more sports. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.